Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, is Greg with Take It Easy. And with me, I have Glyn from
Hello.
Open Energy Monitor and thousands of other interesting projects. It's good to have you on the show, Glyn.
Oh, thank you.
What are we going to talk about? Like we were just saying in the pre-show that you've got so many things to talk about. But let's start with the Open Energy Monitor, right? What is it? Why should people care? Why should they check it out? And, how would you sell it to somebody?
So yeah, Open Energy Monitor, it's an open source energy monitoring project that myself and my friend and colleague Tristan Lee started about 12, 13 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And right at the beginning, we started off small, very small. We were just, at the time, we were building little wind turbines, self-build, Hugh Piggott style, backyard wind turbines, basically. And we wanted a way to be able to measure how much these wind turbines were producing. And back then, there wasn't really any web-connected energy monitoring devices available. And we thought, let's see if we can build our own. We'd heard of, at the time, we were playing around with things like Arduino, a little microcontroller platform.
Yeah.
So we managed to put together like a very simple energy monitor using the Arduino platform and get it web-connected and just start displaying energy data on a very simple web page. And we thought, wow, this is really cool. So we documented it online, open source, and released our designs. And then we got, very soon the website started to gain traction, and we had a lot of people asking us, "Oh, that's really cool. I'd like my own energy monitor. Could you put together like a little kit of parts so we can build our own?" We're like, "Yeah, sure, we can do that." So we started putting electronics in little plastic bags and then sending them off, sometimes all over the world. And that actually grew and grew to the point where we were sending out like tens and tens of these little bags of parts every day. And then people started then saying, "Oh, this is great, but I'd like it pre-assembled, please. I don't want to have to solder it." So we're like, "Okay, let's see if we can do a pre-assembled version." And we obviously developed the platform in the meantime. So, and it's not gone through various iterations over time to where we are now, where I think we're on the 5th generation of the sort of energy monitoring device itself. So it's developed a lot in that time, and now we kind of work with contract manufacturers. Got various ones in the UK we work with, and we now ship fully assembled, fully certified energy monitoring products. But we still have kept the open source and we've got a very active community forum and a group of like-minded people who are involved in the project. And we try and use open source platforms that other people are familiar with, like Raspberry Pi is the main sort of web-connected base station part of all our units. So that's something that's very, everyone's familiar with and works very well.
It's a bit more powerful than Arduino.
Yes, and over time now we're expanding into other areas of monitoring, like we do temperature and humidity monitoring. Heat pump monitoring has been quite a new thing for us, monitoring the output of heat pump and using the same like hardware and graphing platform that we developed. Because alongside all the hardware development, we also, my colleague Tristan, he's more on the software side, but he's developed a full open source graphing and data logging platform to be able to like log large amounts of energy data and be able to graph it all. But we also integrate with all the main platforms out there like Home Assistant, MQTT, Node-RED and things. So it's quite a very flexible platform, and being open source, there's it's totally possible to customize or tweak it to to do whatever you want it to do, really.
That sounds interesting. I mean, Home Assistant is something a lot of people use, to replace Siri or Google, whatever. Hopefully I didn't set off anything in people's houses. But to kind of have a bit more, non-subscription, and I'm controlling it at my own house type of deal. But what is obviously a load of heat pumps? I'm just trying to be playing not devil's advocate, like, I presume this is one of the questions that you get asked. It's like, my heat pump already comes with an app. Why would I put another trinket in there?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Well, there's multiple reasons. I guess it depends what sort of data you're after. Like, so a lot of heat pumps, they come with basic onboard monitoring that might show you how much heat's been delivered or what the COP is. So with a heat pump, the COP, well, I'll probably mention it a few times. I should probably explain what it is now. It's the coefficient of performance. It's like the magic thing about heat pumps is that they multiply the electricity you put in to it. So if you've got like an electric heater, you put in, one unit of electricity, you get 1 unit of heat back out. But heat pumps are magic. You put in 1 unit of heat and you might get up to 5 units of heat back from them. So I guess they're like 500% efficient. But this efficiency can vary quite a lot depending on how well the system's been designed and installed. So being able to monitor and see what COP your heat pump is actually getting is a really important metric and can have quite a big effect on the running cost. So a lot of manufacturers, they make it possible for you to see that using onboard monitoring inside the heat pump. So I guess the first thing is different manufacturers have different ways they use to calculate this. And some of them, or quite a lot of them, the figures they produce are not totally accurate. They're usually good enough to maybe, is your heat pump really bad or is it pretty good? But if you're interested in tweaking it to get the most out of the heat pump, it doesn't really give you a lot of data. But I guess if the COP figure the heat pump gives you is lower than you might expect, the next question is why is it not working very well? And I think that's where our system really comes in. So we've developed like an independent heat pump monitoring system, which works totally independent to any heat pump onboard monitoring. So we supply a bundle to either an installer or it can be self-installed if you're technically inclined, with an independent electricity meter and the independent heat meter, all like billing grade, really, really high accuracy. So you can be certain that the data you get from our monitor is like 100% correct, or at least within 1 or 2%. And we log the data in very high granularity, like 10% data to 10% accuracy. So you can really drill down and graph all that data. We provide tools to do this, and you can see exactly what the heat pump is doing at any given point in time. And then you can use that data to help you, optimize how your heat pump is running, maybe tweak the flow temperature, tweak the weather compensation curve. And there's lots of settings you can play about with, but also to go back to your installer or go back to your manufacturer and say, look, you said the heat pump was going to perform, get X cough, but it's going, it's getting, it's not performing that well. Please, can you come and take a look?
So it's basically like a feedback. You get the data back, and that's the best way to learn things about how to improve your system, right? To see the actual data.
Yeah,
and react
exactly.
Don't just guess.
Because this all started. Tristan and I, and my colleague, we both installed heat pumps in our own houses. I installed mine 2 years ago, and Tristan put his in, I think, 4 years ago now. And we self-installed our own heat pumps, which is quite a learning curve, which we learned a lot about heat pumps in that process. And it was a really valuable experience for us to go through. But I think together with that, the monitoring data we had, we were comparing heat pumps amongst ourselves, the performance of our heat pump, and seeing, basically seeing how well we could get them to perform. We were getting really good performance data, and comparing that with some other, there's a lot of misinformation out there about heat pumps that maybe haven't been installed so well, or maybe people have installed them like you'd install a gas boiler, where
yes, you just put it in, and that's
subtle differences with how a heat pump should be installed. Yeah, we were getting really good performance. We thought, it'd be great if we could share this and make this data available to other people. So we set up a website called heatpumpmonitor.org to share real-world heat pump performance data using the data we were gathering from these billing grade high accuracy heat meters. And now we've got about 280 systems on there. It's growing by the day. We can barely keep up with the number of systems that get added to it. And so it's now grown into a really useful data set with heat pumps all over the country installed by lots of different installers. You can see what sort of performance they're getting and how those heat pumps are running. So if you're looking for a heat pump installer who's got a track record of installing very well designed and high performing heat pump systems, it's a very good place to look. Or if you already have a heat pump and you want to see how your heat pump compares to a similar heat pump in a similar type of house, you can go on there and sort of filter it down and find one. So yeah, it's really been really interesting, like building that and analyzing all the data that's come out of that system.
So it's not just as a person, I don't have to. If I'm non-technical, I can get somebody else to install it.
Yeah, totally. And it's the best time to install it actually is when the heat pump is first going in.
Yeah,
we've got quite a lot of installers we work with who now offer the system like just alongside their heat pump installations, because as a percentage of a total heat pump installation, it doesn't actually add that much to the overall cost of installation, but it gives both the installer and the customer, like, I guess, knowledge and data about how the heat pump is performing, which will hopefully give the best outcome really for both parties.
Yeah, and also satisfies the installation, right? I'm guessing there are some installers who are kind of not happy to have that installed because they don't want to be bothered with all the questions.
I guess that would be a red flag if you
sounds like it.
if you're in conversation with an installer and they push back against having monitoring, there's maybe a reason for that, and maybe you should speak to another installer.
I mean, I've got a heat pump. I've had it for 2 years now, and our installers became highly recommended by some people in the industry, but they didn't even recommend putting the Valent's own monitoring. I had to add that on. I mean, they came back basically and installed it, and we had that conversation the other day. But there's one of the elements of it is the flow meter, right? And that's very hard to install afterwards.
Exactly.
And I'm probably not going to be able to install it until I have a major amount of work done. But like I say, seek if you're in the market for a heat pump, find out somebody who is actually not afraid to have their data exposed. And I suppose the other great thing about it is the fact that you see the data that you've gathered yourself, because presumably the heat pump has a lot of sensors built in, but they don't keep that data forever. They just kind of aggregate it, show it to you in a user-friendly manner, little graph, little figure for COP, and that's about it, right? You don't get the specific, like, what was the temperature on Thursday?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's because we keep all this 10-second data. So I've got, for my heat pump, I've got 2 years now of really granular data, so I can go back and see what was the coldest day in 2022, and what was how much energy did my heat pump use on that specific day, and then compare it to the coldest day this year. Yeah, it's really really interesting. What we never anticipated actually is how competitive installers would be. Quite a lot of installers have started using the platform to basically benchmark their systems with other installer systems, and installers, they love a bit of banter, and they love to like one up their colleagues and friends in the industry. So we coined the term top of the SCOPs, which is the top of the coefficient of performances.
Yeah.
And installers are basically like competing to see who can install the best performing heat pump, which is fantastic, and sharing friendly banters to how their heat pump is performing really well.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I think, I mean, understandably, they're proud of their systems. They put a lot of time, effort, and hard work into installing these systems, and they get to then show to their friends and also prospective customers. As an installer, there's no better way to show a prospective customer that you can install a good system if you can show them the real world performance of their other systems.
Yeah. So
it's a really powerful tool.
It must be. So you've installed your own heat pump. Was that just a exercise in trying to save money and do it, because you're a very handy guy, right? Or was it just an exercise also of, I want to see what goes into actually designing and installing the system to be able to to do this, to the monitoring?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, really, because I've been learning about heat pumps, reading about them, and I've been seeing the monitoring data coming from Tristan's heat pump, because he'd already self-installed his heat pump, and I kind of wanted the challenge to do it for myself, and I quite enjoy learning new things, and I could see that it would be a really valuable experience. And I'd plumbed in a kitchen tap before, but I was vaguely aware of how to join pipes together, and there's some fantastic resources out there. I basically just watched lots of YouTube.
Oh wow!
There's some really great YouTube channels out there, like plumber parts, urban plumbers. You watch enough of those videos, and you can kind of pick up on quite a lot of the best ways to do things. So I just watched lots of YouTube videos and just started doing it, really.
So when installers are telling us, it takes a bit of skill to install a heat pump, could you just briefly describe why is it so hard, by comparison to a gas boiler?
I think it's just knowing. I think almost because I'd never installed a gas boiler before, and I wasn't coming from a gas background, that was almost an advantage for me, because I didn't have those preconceived ways of doing things. I think a lot of problems happen when a gas boiler installer installs a heat pump in exactly the same way as they would install a gas boiler. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, on a simplest level, all you're doing is moving moving water along a pipe, and the only difference is instead of having the gas boiler producing the heat, you have a heat pump producing the heat. I guess one of the key differences is to get a heat pump to perform well, you want it to run at a lower flow temperature than a gas boiler. Modern heat pumps can deliver high flow temperatures, and you might see some marketing people say, "Oh, this is a high temperature heat pump," but that doesn't really mean very much, because if you were to run it at high temperature, it would just be very unaffordable and cost many times more than a gas boiler. So to make them affordable to run, and the most good performing heat pumps, they're less than half the running cost of a gas boiler, if paired with the right tariff, and particularly paired with solar and batteries as well. You could achieve maybe a third of the cost of a gas boiler in the most extreme case if you optimize it well and you choose the right tariff. But I'd say a good performing heat pump should definitely be cheaper than a gas boiler. But to achieve that, you do need to run the heat pump at a lower flow temperature. So that doesn't mean your house will be colder. You can still have 21, 22 degrees all year round in your house with a lower flow temperature. It just means that the system in your house needs to be designed to cope with that lower flow temperature. So what that means in practice is getting the pipework sized correctly and getting the radiators or the underfloor heating, sized correctly. And so that, every house is different. So there's not like one size fits all. You need to do the calculations for your specific house to work out what needs to be done. In my house, it's mostly just a case of installing some bigger radiators. Like the radiators I had were very old, like single panel ones without any fins. So I basically just swapped them all for double panel radiators with fins, and I installed one extra radiator in the living room, like quite a big one.
You've documented the whole thing on YouTube.
Yeah, I've got there's YouTube videos documenting all of this, and I upgraded a little bit of pipe work as well, just to make the pipes a little bit bigger. In most cases, that's not needed for a heat pump, but I wanted to make sure I was really pushing for the best performance possible, so I did that. And then also less is more when it comes to a heat pump. A lot of gas boilers are installed with lots of thermostats and smart TRVs and zone valves and things. And a lot of those things are needed on a gas system because gas puts so much heat into the property. Rooms overheat very quickly. So then you need a way to close off TRVs and things. But with a heat pump, because it runs at a low flow temperature, you don't really get it's a much gentle heat. So you don't get overheating problems as much. And heat pumps work best if you have a large amount of emitter area. So effectively means you don't close your TRVs, leave all the radiators open. It might sound counterintuitive, but it basically means it lets the heat pump deliver its heat in the most effective way possible. And the heat just spreads gently throughout the house. For sure, if you've got a mansion and you don't use the east wing for a few weeks, yet turn off the east wing. But for most houses, you're talking, and my house is a 2-bed, but say Bud Pie is like a standard, 3-bed semi. There's very little to be gained by turning off the bedrooms or turning off different rooms when you're not using them.
Yeah,
for sure you can have the bedrooms at a cooler temperature, but you want to keep as much of the system open as possible for the heat pump. But that generally means it makes it cheaper to install. You don't need to have things like zone valves, buffer tanks, thermostats. You can just get rid of all of that, which actually knocks many, many hundreds of pounds off the installation cost. So my system is super simple. It's just a heat pump, 2 pipes from the heat pump straight into the house, and they just go straight into the radiators, just via a diverter valve, which either heats the tank or heats the radiators. So it's a very simple system, and the actual space it takes up then inside the house is very minimal. I managed to put it into the same little cupboard that my combi boiler was in, and I've got a hot water tank, which is not much bigger really than a combi boiler. So by streamlining it and installing a simple system like that, there's quite a lot of other, benefits to that.
I probably wouldn't recommend that everybody goes around and installs their own heat pump, but I'm sure
it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense at all from a financial perspective, because I saved money by not getting an installer. The installation cost is quite a big cost of the heat pump because the units themselves are already a few £1,000s, but it adds up, when you pay an installer. But actually, I didn't get to claim the grant, so I missed out on £7,500, which I could have got if I'd have done it, through an installer. So yeah, it doesn't really add up. And maybe I saved a little bit overall, but it did take me like a few months of evening or weekends after work every day, coming back and working for hours and hours on my knees in the. So it was an experience, but yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
I'm sure it was a great experience. In our house, when we bought it, we only had single panel radiators upstairs, and even with a gas boiler, in the winter when it was minus whatever outside, it was cold quite often. And I didn't realize at the time it was because the radiators were crap, basically.
Yeah,
and just upgrading the radiators alone probably would have made a huge
even with
difference.
a gas boiler, if you could make a gas boiler run at like 40 degrees or 50 degrees, it'll be you'll get like 95% efficiency. But if you run a lot of gas boilers, by default are left running at like 70 degrees, and you don't really get, condensing boilers, they start getting really efficient at lower flow temperatures.
Yeah,
it's a real shame actually that a lot of condensing boilers are installed in such a way that they never condense, which you lose all the benefit of having this fancy condensing boiler. If you run it at 70 degrees, it doesn't condense.
Yeah, there is this myth that people want to heat fast and high, and that's contrary to actual data. And I've never been a fan of the radiators being too hot, so I've always been turning them down.
Yeah,
on the TRVs usually, because you couldn't change the flow temperature down. But with a heat pump, you don't have the problem of the radiators being too hot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of boilers do have often they do have a way to turn the flow temperature down, but it's usually quite a crude dial. The ideal setup is what all heat pumps have generally is what they're called weather compensation, where it'll automatically adjust the flow temperature based on the temperature outside. Because if it's 10 degrees outside, you don't need such a high flow temperature as you would say when it's -5. But you can get the same weather compensation systems for boilers, but not many boilers, particularly in this country, are fitted with that kind of system.
Yeah.
But it's worth, if your boiler does have an option to reduce the flow temperature, give it a go. Turn it down, and if you manage to reach like a flow temperature of 50 degrees or 45 degrees, your house is heat pump ready. You could literally bolt on a heat pump to that house without any radiator changes, and it would work pretty well. So it's quite a good test that anyone can do.
Going back to the Open Energy monitor, so you would recommend non-technical people to just get their installer to do it at the installation time, or the heat pump installation time, but it is available for people just to install it themselves if they want to.
And particularly if we're going back to Open Energy Monitor in general, we, as well as the heat pump monitoring, as we mentioned earlier, we also do general electricity monitoring, and we do that using like clip-on current sensors. So it's totally possible to install an electricity monitor yourself. Although if you want to do per circuit monitoring, if you want to say monitor your EV or your cooker or your socket circuits, you would have to install the sensors inside your consumer board, which does involve taking the front cover off. And so that's the kind of thing you might want to consider getting an electrician to help with. But if you're just monitoring your total consumption, it's relatively straightforward to clip a sensor around your main, the main cable coming into your house. You can usually do that, quite safely without having to expose any live parts or anything.
And is the benefit over the company doing it the fact that you have, I'm presuming here, but stop me if I'm wrong, you own your own data, right? Nobody else
sees right.
it. You don't have to pay forever subscription, and if the company goes down, the app doesn't stop working, right?
Yeah, totally. So all our units have the capability to do full local login. So like I mentioned, we use the Raspberry Pi as our base station, and that's got quite a lot of storage capacity on it. So you can install, I think we worked it out once, and it was like about 100 years worth of energy data. Because even though we do log 10-second data, it's actually quite a small amount of data. I've got about 5 years worth of data logging, and it's only a few hundred megabytes of data. So, if you're using, I think we use like 8 gigabytes of memory storage on the Raspberry Pi. So that's quite a lot of data storage. But we also we run a cloud service which people can use and post their data to, which is quite convenient because that lets you quite easily access the data when you're away from home without having to do any fancy port forwarding or things like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do choose to use our cloud service, but our cloud service is also open source. So there's nothing stopping you actually running your own cloud server using our open source platform. Or you can, like I say, you can integrate with Home Assistant and log log the same data values into your Home Assistant dashboard and everything, and view it that way.
And that provides a backup in case the SD card on the Raspberry Pi goes bad.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of people having issues with SD cards on the Raspberry Pis, not with Open Energy Monitor, but like in general.
Yeah,
when they write,
we're quite aware of that issue, and early on we did have a few issues like that, but we've put quite a lot of work into optimizing the OS for long-term stability. Like we've had Pis running over 10 years on some installations now, and we do that by we minimize the amount of writes we make to the SD card, and we do things like log the log files to the RAM memory rather than writing them to the SD card, and just write to the SD card in a very controlled way. Okay. So if there is a power outage or you want to prolong the lifetime of the SD card, we found that it does last a very long time like that. And we use industrial grade, very robust SD cards, which are a lot more. They're basically designed for this sort of thing, where a lot of Raspberry Pis use just standard, digital camera, quite cheap SD cards, which do tend to fail after a period of time. But yeah, we've not had too much of a problem with that anymore.
Do you want to talk about, we've been talking for 28 minutes, believe it or not. But do you want to talk about anything else? Your van or... can I just briefly mention that Glyn does loads of things, not just the Open Energy.
Well, it's quite a cool thing we could talk about it briefly. So yeah, I've got an EV camper van. So it's an EMV200. It's probably one of the first EV camper vans. Maybe a handful of first EV camper vans in the UK, because this is going back like 7 or 8 years ago now, when I first converted it to a camper van. And even now, you don't really see many electric camper vans, because we've done a lot of traveling in this camper van. Over those years, every year we go away for maybe 2 big trips, maybe 1 or 2 big trips in the van into Europe, and we don't think we've come across many other electric camper vans in that time.
Do you get loads of people interested or dismissing it, or like, does it engage people? Do they want to have a conversation?
People are really interested in it. I think electric or EVs in general, there's a lot of advantages for a camper van. For example, heating. EVs, they have a built-in aircon and heating system. Some of them even have a heat pump. So for a camper van, that's great. You don't need to add an additional heating system. You can just press a button and you get heat. Where in a camper van, you often have to fit like a diesel heater or a propane heater, which
sounds horrible.
They're smelly and noisy and everything. Where in EV, it's just built in. And also leisure batteries. Camper vans, they all have leisure batteries, but obviously in an EV, you've got a huge battery.
Yeah.
So in my camper van, I've got an induction hob that runs off an inverter, which we then power from the 12-volt system. But whenever the EV is switched on, that's obviously constantly being topped up from the DC converter. So it's basically an unlimited amount of power, and cooking doesn't use much power at all. So we can park up for days at a time, just using the inverter to cook, using power from the traction battery.
Yeah, and I presume loads of camping sites already have power available, right?
That's it, yeah. And whenever we stay at a campsite, we just plug into the hookup. We've never really had a problem doing that. I mean, probably because there's not many EV camper vans. I'm sure when there's more campsites, we'll start to make it more of an official thing. But yeah, we've never had any problem charging from a hookup. At least we don't do it too much in the UK. We often do it abroad, where there's not many EVs in general. But the thing is, if you go to the standard campsites these days, almost every motorhome or camper van is plugged in, and they're all running because we often go away in winter to places like Spain or south of France or Italy, where they're all running like heaters plugged into the hookup, because it's cheaper than running a diesel heater. Yeah. So charging the van, we just charge quite slowly, because often we stay at a campsite for a few days at a time. You don't need to charge quickly.
Yeah.
Just trickle it in. So
you're pulling the same amount of power.
Exactly. We're only pulling like 10 amps or less. So
yeah.
It's and the hookup's all rated to 16 amps. So it's well below what what would be the maximum amount on a hookup. It's quite cool though that more and more campsites are now fitting EV chargers. So if you do want to charge fast, or if you're just going for one night, you can plug into an EV charger there and get a decent amount of charge. But we've also done, if we're traveling a long distance, we often just stop overnight and just plug into a public charger, like a Type 2 7 kilowatt charge point, and we just spend the night. Find one in like a nice quiet car park and just spend the night on the charger. It's great because you can. It's very efficient because you wake up in the morning, your battery is full, and you're ready to drive again.
Yeah,
and you can run the heater all night, and so it's quite quite convenient thing to do.
I'm envious. I won't get. I mean, they don't no longer manufacture ENV200s, but the
Yeah, the ENV200 is not. I wouldn't recommend anyone go out and get an ENV200 now. I mean, they're very reliable vans in terms of like EV tech. They're quite old. It uses CHAdeMO as the rapid charger, and it's got only 40 kilowatt hours, which in a van with the aerodynamics of a brick doesn't get you that far. Maybe 100, 120 miles max. Which which is quite small. My modern EVs, but for us, it's quite a big upgrade because it's the van. When I first got the van, it had a 24 kilowatt hour battery.
Wow.
And believe it or not, we did manage to do some pretty long trips. I think our longest trip was like to Slovenia and back with a 24 kilowatt hour, and south of Spain as well on a separate trip. And they were quite challenging trips. If you go back and look at my YouTube channel, you'll see some early trips through the middle of Spain in winter with 24 kilowatt hours. It was quite a challenge. We had to basically stop at random gas stations and ask if we could like use their outdoor poop plug because there wasn't enough rapid chargers to sort of get us to our destination. But that was going back in like 2016 or so, 2017, and now there's many more rapid chargers. But still, I don't think now I've gone to a 40 kilowatt hour. I'd never go back. I would never go back to a 24.
No. I've got some friends who still have a 24 kilowatt hour ENV200 van, but they only do like local gardening, so they
it's fine for local trips.
Yeah. And it's a van, so it's not as heavy as presumably as a camper.
It's a very reliable van, the ENV200. It's probably not the best van for like long distance trips because it's CHAdeMO. It charges quite slowly, and also the battery pack does tend to get a bit warm if you do lots of rapid charging in a row. So yeah, we tend to, you can't drive at like 70 miles an hour because the battery will get too hot.
Yeah.
So we generally drive at like 55, 60. And then we, after maybe 2 or 3 rapid charges, when the battery starts to get hot, that's a good time to like take a break and maybe cook dinner. I mean, because it's a camper van, whenever you're plugged into a charging point, if it does charge a bit slowly, I just spin the swivel seat around and turn the induction hob on and just cook dinner. So if it takes, 40, 50 minutes to charge, it's not a big problem.
You can relax in your own living room.
Exactly, yeah. You're basically in your living space, so you just hang out for a bit, and fast charging is not so much of a problem. Although recently we have just got a CHAdeMO to CCS adapter, which is quite an exciting development. I never thought when we got the van all those years ago that it would be possible for us to use Tesla superchargers. So driving down here to fully charge, I actually used the supercharger, which is really cool and it's quite a novel experience for me because obviously one, it's CHAdeMO, and two, Tesla superchargers never used to be open to other vehicles.
Yeah.
But now with this adapter, it is possible to use CCS. So we can now use any CCS rapid charger, including superchargers. So I'm really looking forward to our next trip away. I think we're going to go hopefully to Portugal this winter. I'm looking forward to using superchargers because they're very cheap.
Yes.
And they're all over Europe.
Yes, so, and there's plenty of them, so you can just stop openly. And I think more of them are open in Europe to non-Tesla drivers.
They are, yeah. Only quite a limited number are open, I think, in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they're going to open them up eventually. They're just kind of trialing it, but
I think there's quite a lot of they're quite busy sites in the UK. Yeah. So I think they're quite hesitant, understandably, to open up like a busy site to all EVs. It would be busy. They're busy enough with Teslas already.
And all your adventures are always, filmed, and you put them up on your YouTube channel. Because I've been watching your content, forever. So I remember watching your trips to various countries in your ENV200.
Yeah, we've done quite a few trips in it now. Yeah, they're just little videos for so we can remember the trips, and also some of those early trips, especially. I had to do quite a lot of research to work out how to activate a rapid charger in Italy or how to use a rapid charger in Spain. I thought, it's quite nice to share this information with people, so sort of tried to do that through the videos, but these days it's got a lot easier. I say to people now, just get yourself an Octopus Electroverse RFID card, and that will basically activate 95% of the chargers in Europe. Up until Spain, actually, Spain's still a bit slow, a bit backwards when it comes to EV charging. Once you get as far as Spain using Octopus Electroverse, but then you need to start using proprietary network-specific apps, and some of them you need to do tricks like make up a Spanish address just to get past the verification process, or make up a Spanish ID number just so you can create an account. It's ridiculous.
Well, if you need to charge, you need to charge, right?
Exactly. You got to do what you got to do. But there's one or two networks in Spain like I've still not managed to even use, because you need a Spanish mobile phone number.
Okay.
So it's like not particularly friendly to followers, but there's enough rapid chargers these days. You just use the ones that you can use and just ignore the
other ones.
The rubbish ones. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I don't want to keep you too long, but this, I hope this is an interesting conversation, and I hope people will look at the Open Energy Monitor and subscribe to your YouTube channel to actually see your content. And I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure we can have another conversation about converting things and and other things. But thank you for appearing on Take It Easy, Glyn.
Good to chat to you.